Hi, my name's Solomon, and I'm on the Cloud API team. And I'm just going to go over a feature we've been working on recently, which is adding support for Postgres Client SSL certificates to the cloud, to Hasura Cloud. And so just for anyone who doesn't know what that is, Postgres has support for using SSL certificates for client authentication when you're making your connections to the database. And so this is like, if you don't know what that means, it's very similar to like when you're using SSH, and if you want to, you can use an SSH certificate for authenticating your connection instead of a password. And so currently we have support for that implicitly for both open source and on-premise pro. And that's just has to do with the way that all of this stuff works, where the way you use client certificates with Postgres is that you have like a root certificate for your server that issues a key for your client, and then you generate a key and a certificate that you generate for your client. And on your client's file system, you store that certificate, and when you make your connection to Postgres, you just pass in the file path to those certificates as query parameters in the Postgres URI. So in open source and on-premise pro, as a user, you have full control over the file system, and you're manually constructing the connection strings. So you can really easily just create your certificates, put them on your client file system, and use those file paths when you make your connection strings, and it works just out the box. But that doesn't work for cloud, because as a user, you don't have access to the file system. When you're using Hasura Cloud, it's a shared environment with a number of different users, and nobody gets any visibility into the file system. And that's really important for security reasons. So up until now, we haven't supported the SSL certificates for Postgres on cloud, but that was something that people wanted, and it's really useful. It adds it adds to the security of the whole your connection, and it's a really good feature to have. So we wanted to find a way to do that. So the sort of basic requirements for any implementation were that it needed to work. Whatever we did needed to work securely in a shared environment, and where the user had no visibility into the file system and didn't have to, in any form, like in the form of logs or anything, and also just didn't need to worry about the file system or where things are stored or the security of their certificates. Everything needs to be opaque, and we wanted to integrate it into the existing metadata API and console UX in like as simple a way as possible. So the way we sort of did that was taking advantage of the existing environment variables system that we use on cloud, which despite the name, they're not technically environment variables like you would have in an ordinary Unix system. They're not system-wide. They're actually entries in a HashiCorp vault that is per project. So a HashiCorp vault is just like a secure way to store in memory secrets in a key value store, and where everything is encrypted. And so all of your environment variables are stored in this vault and are encrypted. So we thought maybe that would be a great way to leverage an existing part of our multi-tenant system that people are already familiar with. So so we're using this. We're using NVARs to as a user, you would store your certificates in the NVARs, and then at runtime, for every connection string that has NVARs associated with it, we'll look up the secret data, write it to disk temporarily, construct a connection string, and then make the connection. And then when the project is taken down or restarted, we'll erase all of that data from disk. So in other words, so the way that works internally is that when you start up, when your project is launched, we look up the source metadata to see what to check for the connection string if it's present, or if there's environment variables for the connection string, and if there's environment variables for any of the SSL certificate data. If we find them, if we find environment variables for the SSL certificates, then we'll look up those environment variables in the vault and then write them to disk and construct a connection string. And all of this happens internally inside the engine. You don't have to worry about any of it, and none of it gets exposed in logging or anything like that. And so just to show how you would use this in the console, when you're creating a new source or updating a source, you'll have the option to add these custom MVARs. Or sorry, let me take a step back. Before doing that, the first thing you would do is you would go into the cloud console and you would create all your MVARs for all of your data, for all your certificates, and you can just use any arbitrary names for these MVARs. So here's my root certificate, client key, etc. And you just paste in the actual data for your certificates, and all of this gets stored securely. And then when you go to create your source, you'll have the option of enabling client certificates, and you do that by selecting the NVARs that correlate to the certificates for whichever source you're adding, just using these drop-down menus. And then alternatively, if you're using, if you like to use the metadata API directly, you would simply, when you do the PGA add source request, you would add this SSL configuration key with an object containing all of your MVARs for all of your different certificate data, and just like this. So you can use either way. And now I'm going to just show you a quick demo using the metadata API, how you can go about doing this. So, how do I make this not full screen? There we go. So here I have a just a project. Here's the console for an empty project. It's just got one database, which is just the default one here. And I'm going to add a second database that is on Google Cloud Platform that's using a client certificate. So over here, I've already created all these NVARs because these secret data, so I don't want to show the actual values in this call. But I've created all of these environment variables that have the URI for the host, and then all the certificate data, and then you'll see root cert, client key, client cert. So and then I'm going to use the metadata API because we haven't merged in the console UI stuff yet. But so here I'm going to do a request on the metadata API with PG add source, and you'll see I'm using the exact same environment variables: host, client cert, client key, root cert. And I'll just make this request, and we get back a success. So that worked. And now if I go back over here and refresh the page in the console, you'll see now we've got PG1, which is the Postgres database from GCP. And if I show the connection string, you'll see that it's just the host NVAR. So nothing related to the certificates gets revealed in the cloud console, and the same goes for all of the logging. Everything gets redacted in the logging. And now, just to show that it works, I can track a table in here and make a query. So let's track this table, and then, there it is. Yeah, so this is data coming from Google Cloud Platform using a SSL client certificate.